What famous person did you regret meeting because they were Met Tiger Woods when I was 15. He slapped my hat out of my hand. A different golfer whom I didn't know ran up, picked up my hat, and asked if his signature would be okay. I agreed, but I don't know who he was or what his name was, but my grandpa was pleased upon seeing it. Dude, that was Arnold Palmer. My dad had a good story about meeting Arnold Palmer. He was an elevator man in South Florida. He was working on an elevator at some country club neighborhood when a woman walks up and starts berating him because that damn elevator never works, blaming my dad specifically. Thing is, he was sent when jobs were notoriously hard. This was his first time working on this elevator. So she screams for a while and eventually goes upstairs. I'm sure tired from all the exertion. A few minutes later, Arnold Palmer walks downstairs. He says to my dad, "So I hear you met my wife." My dad just replies, "Yeah. She's quite a huh." My dad says, "Yeah. Sorry about that." My dad said he was classy, unlike his wife. By the way guys, if you are enjoying this video so far, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel. It will help us out quite a bit, and if you don't enjoy the videos in the future anymore, you can always unsubscribe. Let's get back to the video. Jared Leto. I sat next to him on a flight from Monterrey, Mexico back in 2018. Absolute. Well, right now he's 3 out of the top 6 on this thread, so I'm super convinced that he's the biggest piece of celebrity of all time, minus like Bill Cosby, R. Kelly, and I'm sure probably a bunch of other people. I really hope Leto sees this thread and realizes that he sucks. The problem with narcissists is that they think there's nothing wrong with them and it's the other people's fault. So, I highly doubt that realization will ever happen. They think they're the greatest and everyone else is wrong. He creeps me out. I think the first time I heard about him was when he gained some attention for holding a bust of his own head at the Met Gala. Pictures of him in a red robe with an expressionless face. I get it, it's art, but it seems so self-obsessive. I feel like he thinks he's some kind of prophet. No, you're just a rich 50-year-old boy who's out of touch with reality and a little too attached to your mom. Late to this but Pauly Shore. It was mid-90s in New York City and wife and I were at a very popular Asian restaurant with a huge wait. He walks in with an entourage and tries to worm his way ahead of everyone else. He tried to play the back quote "Don't you know who I am" card. Hostess was having none of it, said "Don't know, don't care, you'll wait." They left in a huff. Everybody in the comedy world knows this. If it wasn't for his parents, he'd be cleaning buses on the night shift. I sat a few rows behind him at Super Bowl 41. He was wearing a hat with his name on it and spent the whole game turning around and standing up to see how many people were noticing he was there. Pauly Shore is an absolute. I had the displeasure of spending an evening with him after my roommate, who I was on a night out with, spotted him and insisted on being his arm candy for the night. David Cross is pretty miserable. He's from Atlanta and his sister runs a food truck in town. Her recipes were all named after David Cross / Arrested Development type stuff. So my wife and I, being fans of David, asked about it and she told us she was his sister. So for months we chat her up anytime we order food from her truck, and eventually David's in town. She invites us to come to the food truck park to meet him, so we bring a poster from the early 2000s and are super pumped to meet him. We get there and she's very anxious and hesitant to introduce us. Weird, but okay. No, it's okay, I'll introduce you. She doesn't. He was incredibly dismissive and unpleasant. Never heard of anyone having a good interaction with him. Best interaction was with Conan O'Brien. He's a total class act. Chatted him up in a bathroom line of all places and said my wife and I were huge fans. He said we should come by the table to chat. I told him we didn't want to interrupt his dinner, but he insisted, then asked if we wanted pictures and was super cool. Glad to hear that about Conan. I would love to meet that dude. Just seems awesome. His self-depreciating humor reminds me of myself. I think he is responsible for my sense of humor with his writing on The Simpsons and SNL. He came in for dinner at a restaurant I worked for, was an absolute charmer, and then stayed an hour after dinner signing autographs and taking pictures with people. The guy knows how to work a room, and was very friendly and warm. Incredibly tall too, lol. Kurt Vonnegut. I had to get in touch with him frequently for work, at a non-profit, for several years. He was never once even vaguely polite. Really? That sucks to hear. My uncle actually has a great story about meeting Kurt Vonnegut in the late 90s/early 2000s. He was walking down the street in Montauk one day and saw Vonnegut walking past him. My uncle said, "Excuse me, Mr. Vonnegut, I just want to say that I'm a great admirer of your work," and Vonnegut apparently said thank you and stopped to talk to him for a few minutes. He asked what my uncle did for work, and he told him he was a professor, and Vonnegut's eyes lit up. Then Vonnegut asked him a few questions about his subject, philosophy, before bidding him a good day. My uncle then ran into him on the street again about a week or two later, and Vonnegut passed him with a smile and a nod, while saying hello again, "Professor." My uncle loves to tell that story. I tried to bum a cigarette off Kurt Vonnegut once, when he was a guest professor at my old college. Before I could even say a word, he looked up and growled at me, so naturally, I panicked and fled. At the end of the year, the school paper did an interview with him, and he was like, for some reason, hardly anyone came to my office hours. "Yeah, Kurt, it's because you growl at people." Reggie Jackson. He was a childhood idol of mine. I got the opportunity to get a photo with him at some booth at a trade show called Internet World years ago during the .com boom. No one was in line to get pictures with him, so I walked up to get a photo while he was apparently trying to get the girls in the next booth over to sleep with him. He acted all but that I asked for a photo, even though that is what he was hired for, and rolled his eyes. I guess he thought I blocked him by just showing up in line to get a picture. I tossed the picture in the trash once I got it. Later that day I got a bull signed by Steve Garvey, who was super nice. He replaced Reggie Jackson as my hero that night. Most interactions involving Reggie Jackson that I've read about have been negative. That said, my dad used to work as a mechanic, and I'm not sure if he worked on Reggie's car, but he got to speak with him for a short time. Said he was a nice enough guy. My mom was pregnant with me at the time, and he asked him if he could write an autograph for me, which he was happy to do. I still have it. Just on a regular cardstock piece of paper it says "Redditing at work 5, good luck Mr. October." He also met Ricky Henderson a few times through the same place, and my dad loves Ricky Henderson. Says the Man of Steel is always cool and pleasant. I've got a couple signed cards from him. My dad has been a radio personality for over 30 years and worked in country music for over half of it. He gets to meet celebrities semi-regularly. Apparently Keith Urban was really nice. Carrie Underwood was kind of mediocre. BC he caught her right after her performance and she was tired. But Kenny Chesney puts the D&D back. Direct quote from my dad. Kenny promised to sign some pictures, shirts, etc. for a couple of kids who won a game through the radio. Kenny instead took a bunch of groupies into one of the back rooms of the radio station with a bottle of whiskey and locked the door. When my dad tried to get him to open the door and fulfill his end of the deal, he called the cops on my dad, and he was lucky enough to get a cop who was a good acquaintance. Cop said there wasn't much he could do other than make Kenny leave. So that's what he did. Kids never got their stuff signed, so my dad gave them some coupons for free pizza. He said that after a few years other radio hosts told him they had similar encounters. Can confirm. Before he was famous, he was touring state fairs. After the show he asked my friend and I to join him on his tour bus. We were 16. We went and hung out for a bit, got some free beers, and then when he asked us to go back to the hotel, we noped out there. Spent some time with Keith Urban. Legitimately nice dude. He would show up to the studio one day in an old Chevy pickup, and the next day in a Bentley. He told me that you're supposed to get driven around in a Bentley, but that's no fun. He had a sweet bike too. Nice BMW. I remember one day he was like, gotta run. And then he was at Grand Ole Opry on TV like an hour or so later. Very down to earth though. I have the perfect combination of bad star / good star. It was at Dragon Con, maybe 2005. I'm going through the big autograph room, waiting to get David Carradine's autograph. He looked so mad. He didn't say a word as I told him how much I enjoyed his work. Okay, I get it, maybe he was having a bad day. Next to Mr. Carradine was Mark Singer, star of Beastmaster, V, etc. Mr. Singer is smiling, talking to people as they go by. He looks genuinely happy to be there. Suddenly, a woman behind me stumbled and dropped a huge stack of materials she wanted autographed. Mr. Carradine looked down on her like she was a bug. Mark Singer jumped over his table and started helping the woman pick up her things. Didn't hesitate one moment, just started helping. That's when I decided that, if I ever became famous, I was going to try to be like Mark Singer, not David Carradine. Mark Singer will tell you, if you're being disrespectful, no doubt. Sometime within a year or two of when you met him, I had met him at Gen Con. I was walking with a few buddies around the convention, and one of us saw him from a good distance away. My buddy went, "Oh hey, it's the Beastmaster." Well, Mr. Singer must have been using the eyes of the eagle, or whatever, because surprisingly fast one of us gets a tap on the shoulder. It was Mark Singer, reminding us that he is a person, and that it is rude to point like we had, and we should instead say hello. We apologized and he shook our hands, and that's how the Beastmaster taught a bunch of 20-somethings manners. Ace Frehley of Kiss. It was at a rock and roll /TV/ movie memorabilia convention in the mid 90s, shortly before the Kiss reunion, and he clearly didn't want to be there. He didn't talk to fans, didn't say hi, hell, he didn't even look at you when you came to his table. He just signed whatever you placed in front of him, and then you were hustled away. On the other hand, Adam Batman West was at the next signing table, and he was a totally cool guy, shook hands, chatted with everyone, signed whatever we wanted, posed for pics, etc. Meeting him more than made up for Ace's early hungover douchebaggery. I met Burt Ward, the guy that played Robin to Adam West, at the airport. My kid was little, and was crying, because he didn't want to get on the airplane. Mr. Ward was about to board, but stopped to try to cheer him up. He gave him a signed photo. It was kind of lost on my kid, but I thanked him. We got on the plane, and when we were walking through first class, Ward gave him a fist bump. Super sweet man. Me and my sister saw Alec Baldwin, Tina Fey, and Salma Hayek on the street when we were eating lunch. They were just coming out of a car, about to go into some building next to us. We had no idea why they were together, but in retrospect it was definitely because they were filming 30 Rock together. My sister said, "Oh my god, is that Tina Fey?" And Alec Baldwin turned around and went right in her face and said, "Say that. Don't speak to us. Why would you say something like that? You can't speak to us, not now." But it didn't really end there. He yelled again at us outside his building, saying, "Don't look over here. Turn around and eat your food." He sounded genuinely furious at us. Almost like he wanted us to yell back and start something with him. Honestly, my sister was on the verge of tears. It was horribly embarrassing. Everybody knows now that Alec Baldwin has a history of screaming at people. But at the time we had no idea. Don't get me wrong, my sister shouldn't have yelled at Tina Fey like that, but the way Alec snapped was straight up scary, like he was about to physically hurt her. Salma Hayek and some other lady who I didn't recognize came over and apologized to us. She asked if we wanted her to go and get Tina and get her autograph, because apparently Tina felt bad too, but we said no. She then talked to us about the food we were eating, which was Mexican food, and we ended up having a brief conversation about New York's lack of quality Mexican food. She was incredibly charismatic and sweet. I met Baldwin once myself. I always look for his name in threads like this to see if anyone else has had a similar experience. The guy was a complete even after borrowing a pen to write some notes for an impromptu speech he was about to give. It about ruined 30 Rock for me. When I was 6 or 7, Hulk Hogan pretend WrestleMania chased me out of a boardroom I wasn't supposed to be playing around in at Little League Complex, Cross Bayou in Pinellas County. Anyways, the story is my dad was coaching a game for my brother's team. I went to go sneak around in an empty room. Hulk's son played baseball there too, and he must have seen me sneak in the room. I was hiding under the front desk when he came in with his Hulk voice, "Who's sneaking around in here?" and 7-year-old me nearly had a heart attack. He chased me out of the room while I snuck out acting like he couldn't see me. Looking back at it, you can tell he was just having fun with a kid and his famous persona. But at the time I was absolutely traumatized and nobody believed my story. Was staying at a Marriott on the concierge level when I walked by the VIP lounge and Hulk Hogan and Stone Cold were sitting in their post-match devouring the biggest shrimp cocktail platter I've ever seen. I nodded and said, "Hey Terry," and Hulk boomed, "Come have some shrimp, brother." I politely declined and said I was going to let them eat in peace. I think he appreciated that more than if I had asked him for an autograph. Hogan is a good dude. Edit, upon reflection, it was almost certainly Goldberg, not Stone Cold. I'm not really a wrestling fan and get those two mixed up sometimes. It was over 20 years and it was a 10-second interaction. The management regrets the error. Justin Timberlake. This was when I was working a drive-thru at a Burger King around 2002, 2003 or so. He came up at the drive-thru with someone else driving, but he was sticking his head out like hey 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 at us. I didn't really recognize him, but he asked if we knew who he was, and I said no, but my coworker said yes. Then he looked at me like you don't know and was just really confused. My coworker said it was Justin Timberlake, and he said yeah, hello, come on man. He then sort of just had small talk. He asked us how work was, how our day was. But here's the thing, the entire time, he is leaning all the way over on the driver, who is clearly horribly uncomfortable and a bit crushed by him leaning over on him. He asked me if I was from the Middle East, and I said no, and he clearly didn't listen, and then said yeah that sucks, sorry for the whole Afghanistan thing. He then asked us if we wanted his autograph, and we said sure, and he wrote it down and gave it to us. He then said bye and left. It was all in all a really funny experience, and I try not to let it influence my view of him, because he was clearly on something, but he just came off a bit like a big goofy attention love the entire time. Not my story, but a coworker's story. Let's call her Holly. Holly was a flight attendant many years ago, and on one flight Whitney Houston and Bobby Brown were in first class. Holly was going through taking drink orders and politely asked Whitney Houston if she would like something to drink, but didn't get an answer. So assuming she didn't hear her, Holly asked her again if she would like something to drink. Whitney Houston looked out the window with a disgusted face in response. Bobby Brown then said to Holly, she doesn't speak to the help. Then ordered for her. Imo, if you're flying commercial, you are not hot. I cannot fathom the level of arrogance it takes to think people are so far below you that they are not deserving of being spoken to by you. Edit, I was not moved by Whitney Houston's death, but she did not deserve to die over this. Y'all. I would not have thought Bobby Brown was the politer of the two. If you'd seen that TV series they did being Bobby Brown, you would totally see him as the better person. He wasn't perfect by any means, but he seemed pretty normal and rational. She always seemed mean, drunk, high, and delusional. That show was very revealing and quite entertaining, which is probably why you can't watch it anywhere anymore. I was hooked on the first episode and never missed one. James Franco, though I technically didn't meet him, but sat in on a panel he did at a film festival. I was in HS and was at the festival with 3 friends when we got word he was doing a Q&A about one of his movies that had just come out, and we got really excited. We waited over an hour to get in to see the panel. We were let into the room where we waited another 45 minutes for him to show up. When he did show up, boy looked rough. It was almost 4 PM and he looked beyond hungover. His clothes were dirty, he OBV hadn't showered, and he spent more time talking to the floor than anything else. But the cherry on top? His ego could have filled the room. Every question that was asked he made into a story about how great he was, both actor, director, and producer. I do think some of his stuff is funny, but he's a B actor at best. I remember clear as day some woman asked him to describe a role that was challenging for him and how he overcame it. He just laughed at her. The Q&A ended up being so boring I fell asleep in my chair 0/10. I met James Franco while working on one of his films when he was teaching at NYU Film School. He was kind of a jerk, wouldn't look at anyone, acted aloof like he didn't want to be there. When he had to say something to me, he asked someone else to talk to me instead of speaking to me directly, even though I was like 5 feet away from him. It's funny, he actually visited Brooklyn College for like half a semester. The girls were all enamored with him until they realized how much a he was. The only time he spoke to someone was to hit on them. I'm gonna copy paste one of my previous comments because it sort of fits. I once made a drink for Britney Spears at Starbucks 6 or 7 years ago, and the experience left us all thinking she was an entitled diva, but with the info that's come out in the last couple years, I realized we had it all wrong. I was on bar that day and I remember glancing into the lobby and thinking, huh, that chick looks like Britney Spears, only older and skinnier. She was gorgeous, but looked drawn and thin. I thought maybe hungover or partied way too hard, wearing this denim miniskirt, platform heels, a fringe halter top, and smeared dark eyeliner. I reached for my next cup, and in Sharpie it said Brit Dave, and I was like. So anyway I make the drink. Britney is standing with her arms crossed tightly over her chest, looking at the floor, very standoffish. I call out the drink for Dave. He stares at it, reaches for it, then draws her hand back to her arms crossed position. Some dude picks it up and hands it to her, and they leave. I catch my coworker on register and say what's that, and she automatically begins recounting her experience, which was that, when she said hi. What can I get for you? The bodyguard said, Brit, what are you having? Though she was right in front of my coworker, she gave her order to her bodyguards. Apparently there were 2, and although my coworker could hear it perfectly, the bodyguard repeated it. When coworker went to write her name on the cup, which was standard and enforced at all times at my store, bodyguard held up his hand and said, excuse me, do not write her name on the cup. It's Dave. My name's Dave. So that explains the crossed out name. My coworker was irritated because it was like she was invisible, had addressed Britney directly because she was at the counter, had clearly heard the order, had written down the exact name that you'd addressed her by, but it was like she felt she wasn't good enough to have direct contact with her, so she had to have some sort of middleman when they were 2 feet apart. Now that I've heard about how little advocacy Britney has over her entire life, I'm completely second guessing my initial reaction to the experience. It seems entirely plausible, now that she wasn't permitted to interact with anybody during that outing. Extremely sad. This is the end of the video. Thank you guys for staying with me till the end. If you enjoyed watching this, you might as well watch these too.